Welcome to the Sports Pharmacy podcast, where we dispense clinical and evidence-based information to optimize health and human performance. My name is Brandon Welch, clinical sports pharmacist, and your host of the show. Today's episode takes a powerful turn as we sit down with a truly inspiring guest, someone who's not only defied the odds, but redefined them. She's an elite athlete competing at the highest level while managing a chronic health condition. And she's here to share how mental resilience, a strong medical team, and a commitment to performance optimization have helped her thrive. You'll also get a glimpse of how a sports pharmacist plays a crucial role in this journey, helping athletes fine-tune medications, supplements, and performance strategies to compete safely and effectively. Our guest today is one of the fastest women on two wheels and one of the most impactful voices in sport and health advocacy. Mandy Marquardt is a 27-time U.S. national champion, five-time American record holder, and a two-time Pan American Games medalist. She currently races for the USA cycling national team and edge cycling team, with her sights firmly set on the 2028 Olympic Games. Diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at just 16, Mandy didn't let the diagnosis define her. She used it to fuel her pursuit of excellence. For over 15 years, she represented Team Novo Nordisk, the world's first all-diabetes professional cycling team. Off the track, Mandy is just as driven. She's a Penn State MBA candidate, has been honored by the United Nations for her advocacy, and is a passionate ambassador for True Sport, Rodale Institute, and St. Luke's University Health Network. Whether she's racing, mentoring, or educating the next generation, Mandy is all about impact. Without further ado, please welcome our guest to the show, Mandy Marquardt.
Thank you, Dr. Brandon. I
Of course.
appreciate that.
Not a problem. Just to kind of give our listeners some backstory here. So Mandy and I actually met from our sports magazine that we have published every other month on a topic called special populations. And I wrote an article on type 1 diabetes and the athlete population. And we've connected kind of ever since. And, it's funny, Mandy, it's like, we've kind of been talking about type 1 diabetes and the athletic population and building that support community for a few weeks. But it dawned on me as I was kind of typing up my podcast notes. I'm like, man, I feel like I've known you a lot longer.
Yeah, there's something about, did we go to school together? I mean, maybe we're around the same age, but
Right.
I just feel like there's the synergies, they've aligned. It's interesting because I liked one of the posts from the Sports Pharmacy Network on Instagram, and then they shared the article with me. But then on LinkedIn, you were tagged on a podcast that I did with iHeartRadio. It's about psoriasis. And it's just how all happened on the same day. So I'm like, we got to connect.
Hey, it's like the universe of like-minded people kind of coming together. So
Yeah.
I thought it was cool. I think that was Todd Urey, who runs the Pharmacy Podcast Network, a huge network platform for pharmacists. So pretty cool.
Yeah, it was great I've never shared my story with psoriasis. So and I'm excited to have this conversation. And we've been having a lot of conversations lately, going back and forth, and I appreciate your insight.
Absolutely. Well, hey, your story and your journey is very inspiring, and we're excited to kind of share it with the world here. So kind of to really kind of kick things off here, what inspired your journey into track sprint cycling, and how did this journey all begin for you?
So it really began in Germany. So I was born in Germany. My dad's German, my mom's American. And then when I was about 6, I moved to Florida as a family, and my mom's from Florida. So they wanted me to get into sports. And also you being in Florida, it's great, like, to be active, to play tennis, to swim. So I did all of that, and I was really interested in trying a triathlon. So I did some sprint triathlons, and alongside of that, my dad looked up, and there was a velodrome in Cooper City, Florida, because I grew up in Plantation, Florida. And yeah, not too far from where you just had the Sports Pharmacy Network, the summit, right?
Yeah, our inaugural conference.
Yes, yeah, right by Nova University, not too far from me. It's like, so I grew up down there, swimming, running, playing tennis, and Yeah, I really love the bike. I was just burnt out from tennis. I had a stress fracture in my foot already at 10 years old. I was pretty tall, so I was always playing with people that were older than me. And back then there wasn't a lot on recovery, um, as well. Even though I had a massage here and there, or I went to the pool with my friends, there was not a lot of discussions around recovery. I also did Pilates. The owner of Orange Theory, so she opened up Orange Theory, but she had her own Pilates studio. Her name is Ellen Laughman.
Her story is actually pretty inspiring. Yeah,
Yeah.
how
So
Orange Theory started. So
yeah, she's incredible. So she's yeah, like find her so inspiring, but she was tough on me in class. She would always tell me to fix my posture because I would always slouch because I'm pretty tall. I'm like 5'9". But yeah, so
yeah.
that really kicked off kind of just having a more dynamic career at a really young age. And as a cyclist too, I wanted to go to race in Europe. And I'm like, well, I'm from Germany and my dad's German. So I'm like, when my parents had split when I was 14, my dad moved back and I was like, I want to come with you. I want to race. And he's like, where are you going to live? How are you going to make that happen? So he made it happen. I stayed at a youth home until he could get me some housing. But yeah, I competed at the States in Germany. I know like there's a lot that happened in between, but I competed at States, I competed at nationals, and I was third at nationals. And I was an endurance cyclist back then, so I was just
Hmm.
like lots of miles, which is very different from what I do now.
It's
But
the complete
I
opposite.
yeah, but the
Yeah.
event that I podiumed in was a sprint event. I don't understand why my sprint potential was not identified when I was younger. Maybe because my anatomy was different. I didn't spend a lot of time in the gym then.
Yeah.
But yeah, then a few months later we went and did some VO2 max testing and I didn't have the greatest breakfast. It's probably like pretzels and yogurt. I don't know. My diet wasn't like great. I didn't. There was not a lot of talk about nutrition back then too. I think it was like 2007 or eight. And yeah, the test went great. But then they also did blood work and saw that my blood sugars were elevated. It was 360, and I had no idea what that meant. I was just hoping it would go down and I would get better. But then my dad ended up coming picking me up, and then when I went to the hospital and I was there for 2 weeks. Um, that was really
Man.
difficult. Yeah, yeah,
And
two
the
weeks.
anxiety, like kind of waiting for, okay, what's going on? What does this number mean?
Yeah,
Especially, since I'm a competitive athlete, when can I get back on the track? Like I'm
really.
sure all
Yeah.
those things are kind of running through your mind.
I've never spent so much time in the hospital. I'm like, what is going on? But they did all these tests on me, which I find it really interesting looking back. They had me there for 2 weeks, where in the US, you're probably only at the hospital or seeing a doctor for a couple of days. I just met someone recently diagnosed, and they were like in and out of the hospital, and they haven't gotten the right care still, like
Jeez.
because they're backed up on getting the help they need. I guess just it's tough.
Yeah.
I was so lucky and fortunate then to get that. They did all the routine blood work testing, make sure my organs were still functioning. But yeah, I met with a nutritionist, but obviously it was like the worst. It was like barely the carb to protein ratio was probably way off, and
Yeah.
I don't know, it just wasn't like ideal to me. And then I had a doctor tell me that I would never be able to compete at a high level in my sport. And that was really challenging because I'm like, all this is happening at once. Like you're just telling me like my life is technically over. Like I can't
Especially at
compete.
16, 17 years
Yeah.
old. That's wild.
Yeah, I literally just wanted to eat chocolate, like the best pure chocolate, and I did that when I got out of the hospital because I was like, I was just I didn't take care of it for a little bit. I did and I didn't.
Uh-huh.
Um, I I was like angry kind of at it. It was kind of that denial stage, and it
Yeah.
lasted a little bit until I showed up at a race and I didn't have my insulin with me, and I let my team down because I was a big part of that team event. And yeah, yeah. So lesson learned, but I just didn't feel supported by the community as well there, like the coaches and the people. Like they didn't know, they thought more I was like a liability.
And maybe they really couldn't understand it, right?
Yeah.
I'm assuming you were probably one of their first athletes who may have been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and they maybe didn't understand how to care for it, treat it, triage it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
complex. I mean, like you've said, there's not a one size fits all approach to managing. Also the training intensities and the travel, like there's so many variables that I've learned throughout my journey. So I was just really just figuring it out, and my goal was just to race at nationals again. And that was maybe happening like 5 months later, and that was the goal, was like just race nationals. And then I did that same sprint event, and I landed on the same podium, like literally the same spot on the podium.
Wow.
And that was a pretty defining moment because I was like, I just did that with diabetes, and I'm on the same place right now. And I have
Yeah.
this photo because they're they're basically, like, you don't see a difference in
Yeah.
the photo, but yeah, it's, I know when I see it, I'm like, I didn't have diabetes here, and now I do, and I'm literally in the same spot. That's pretty like a full circle, and I actually hold the national record, the American record in that event, so that's like a really meaningful
Wow.
event to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that's remarkable.
Yeah.
Now,
Thanks.
just out of curiosity, like, here you are just going through life, competing in your event, then all of a sudden, you feel a little bit off from doing this VO2 max testing. You're sent to the hospital to see what's kind of going on. Then you get these high blood sugar numbers where you're confused what they actually mean, and then you find out you're diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Can you take us back to when you were first diagnosed with that? How did you feel mentally? And maybe what were some of those coping mechanisms that you used to kind of help overcome it, to still compete at a high level? Because what you did is impressive, unheard of, and unprecedented. So hats off to you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been asked that before, and I think about that, and it's like sometimes honestly, like I try to say like I powered through it and I did, but I will be honest and say like it's kind of a blur because I feel like it was almost like traumatic in a way
Hmm.
for me, that I blocked it out how I actually felt. But I remember being there in 2023, and I'll answer your question, but I remember being there in 2023 to visit my dad after the Pan American Games and riding my bike past the hospital in Mannheim. So that's where I was diagnosed. Literally, like I was born in Mannheim, not at the hospital, but
Yeah.
like it was just like a flashback moment, like how much I've achieved since like walking through those doors
Wow.
and
I mean,
or
that's a
walking out of
humbling
those doors. Yeah.
experience, right?
Yeah, it was more of just like I did that. Like I can't believe like I've experienced all this. And I'm like riding my bike with my dad here in front of it, and life has just like passed, and there's just so much that it's taught me that I think it's like, honestly, I think in ways it's made me a better athlete. Back then I was obviously a really difficult time. I didn't feel supported. I had my
Hmm.
father, but my mother was back in America. I just didn't have that community like there is now. I didn't know anyone with type 1 diabetes, so I kind of felt ashamed of it. Um, but I knew that when my blood sugars were good, I was able to focus in school. I remember my grades in math class were not great, like bad. Like I just couldn't focus. I'm like, why am I looking at this 3 times and not getting it? I remember things just being harder, and I'm
Yeah.
like, it has to be easier. It has, in some ways, like, so just getting back on my bike made me really happy, and exercise really was the best thing for me. And yeah, just, but adrenaline and nerves, and when I started racing, my blood sugars would just go wild, and sometimes they still do because it's just adrenaline. But I know a little bit better now how to prepare for that.
Hmm.
But it was just yeah, I would say it's like it was a really difficult time in my life, but also a turning point in my life. It's like, why did this happen? But maybe it was meant to be for a certain reason. And I lost my brother at 6 weeks. I had a twin brother. So I'm like, maybe my life is meant to like help people,
Yes.
like to give back, and that's something that's always I felt really fulfilling. Alongside of, like, I've always wanted to help people, but I didn't know in which way.
Hmm.
And I feel like just naturally, like through doing what I'm doing and inspiring other young kids and families, I mean, I couldn't ask for more. And through sport, it just, there's a lot. There's a lot that sport teaches you. There's a lot that I have to thank for it.
And it's like, to also hear from what's considered like a thought leader, a physician, to pretty much tell you that, hey, your career's over. And then you still were able to surpass that through, your dad at the time seemed like he was like your best support system since he was kind of like the closest access to you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you probably understand this by now, like how important it is to try to build a strong support system when unforeseen circumstances happen like this and you're trying to figure out, oh my god, okay, what's the next step for me to do? How do I push or power through this?
Yeah. Yeah, my dad was my biggest support system. I mean, our relationship did grow stronger because of that. My dad has always been really tough on me, but I think because he came from a race car driving background, and so he just he's German. He just expects the best, right? And um, but I think in a lot of ways that just made me a competitive athlete, but also sometimes a stubborn athlete. But we did have our relationship did get stronger because there were times when I was around before I was diagnosed, I was just tired and I didn't know why, but he had sometimes questioned if I wanted to be here and if I felt like it. I know that
Oh,
sounds really wrong, but
yeah.
I could see where he is coming from because he's like, you're so fit, like you're fine, like, but it's like one of those things, like, would we have ever found out? So yeah.
So
Yeah,
what is
but it
typically like your intense training look like, considering that, you have type 1 diabetes and trying to figure out, okay, what's the best way to dose my insulin based off of obviously a physician's guidance so that your blood sugars don't kind of go out of whack. Have you ever had like any close calls during training or an event?
I wouldn't I would say now as a sprinter, I'm able to race and manage it a bit better than rather than when I would race multiple hours at a time. But I will say that I take insulin. I take fast acting insulin. I take long acting insulin. I take injections. That works for me. It might not work for somebody else with diabetes. But I have a continuous glucose monitor, so I'm able to really track my blood sugars. But yeah, I mean, in training, I barely sometimes have to take insulin because it's so routine. But when I
Hmm.
race, there's nerves and there's adrenaline and there's you lack of sleep because you're competing over 4 or 5 days. So I'm definitely more sensitive and need a little bit more insulin on board. I would say a lot of it is just controlling my nerves, but I would say by the third day, my nerves are so shot because I'm kind of tired that my blood sugars are kind of balancing out because I'm not as stressed about like the competition. But I think that helps as I get into like just back to a good racing routine. Things just do level out. But yeah, it's just making sure what I do in training is similar to what I do on race day. I don't try to change too much. But I will say that when I moved back from Germany to Florida in 2010, I came across Team Novo Nordisk, and that's the world's first all diabetes professional cycling team. I was very fortunate to be with them for the last 15 years, and we'll get into that. And I race now for Edge Cycling, but this is
Uh-huh.
my coach's team, and I've always been part of the team, but I've been wearing just a different jersey and had a different mission, but I'm still living that mission of helping and making an impact. But um, yeah, I came from an endurance background, and that was really challenging. But we had team camps, and one thing we did notice when we go for a really hard ride and we come back is that there's some athletes, they did some testing. There's some athletes that went for a really hard ride. So you went for a really hard ride or run, it's best to cool down. You're going to have better blood sugars throughout the day if you cool down versus if you just stop abruptly and you don't cool down. So I've noticed cooling down around competition, training sessions just help make sure that my blood sugars are better throughout the day and the next day. So that was an interesting kind of study at camp they did.
And I want to pause for a second to highlight, some of the benefits that a sports pharmacist can play in a athlete that may have type 1 diabetes is because it's something that, I definitely want to touch on that you mentioned, where you said when you're racing and your adrenaline's high and all of these, norepinephrine, epinephrine, these are fight or flight hormones that can increase your blood sugars, your blood pressure. Sometimes that can cause your blood sugars to kind of go out of whack. And you mentioned how sometimes you'll have to kind of correct, your insulin dosing. So the beautiful thing about a sports pharmacist is one of their main roles is trying to fine tune medications to kind of mirror or match the athlete's competitive or training lifestyle. And in your case, someone who is a sprint cyclist, right? A sports pharmacist being able to look at your CGM data and looking at those trends and patterns and seeing it over a course of a few days, a week, and looking at how you're training, they're able to help with what's called calculating that correction factor, right? For you to be able to figure out, okay, how much should I dial up that insulin or how much should I dial it back depending on where your blood sugars are at. So that way you can perform at optimal levels. And then I always say, Mandy, that's one thing that I preach and I preach heavy about. It's a shared decision making process, right? Meaning that, hey, how do we also communicate this information to the endocrinologist? How do we communicate this information to the sports nutritionist or dietitian to help maybe tweak any type of pre-game nutrition strategies that you may need as well? And so when we think about, okay, how does a sports pharmacist kind of fit into this athlete's care team? Is it's really being able to fine tune those medication dosing adjustments so that way athletes can continue to kind of compete at a high level.
I think that's so valuable, and I think one of your um, he attended the summit. He was at the Olympics, right? For with one of the teams. He was a sports pharmacist for the team.
Robert Nickel, yes,
Yeah, yeah.
one
I
of my
think
good
that's so
buddies.
yeah, I think that's so valuable just to have a different perspective and a different insight or understanding. Like your niche, right, is type 1 diabetes. You said sickle cells as well, hypothyroidism. Like,
Hypo, yep.
yeah,
Yeah, I think all those things. I mean, even talking about hypothyroidism, right? We've
yeah.
talked about this kind of back and forth through an email exchange. Like sometimes, these TSH or thyroid stimulating hormones may have a trend where it's going up or down, and we may think, okay, we need to adjust the dose, but we forget that the thyroid hormone, it's very dynamic and it's transient, meaning that there's a variety of things that can impact it, such as lifestyle, right? So stress, exercise, poor sleep, that can affect your thyroid levels. Nutrition, right? So when we think of nutrition, iodine, iron, vitamin D, zinc, all these different vitamins and minerals play a factor into that conversion of what's called T4, which is our inactive thyroid hormone, into our more biologically active hormone T3, which is the master regulator of what helps kind of keep the body into its optimal physiological function. And so before we tweak any of those doses, and this is why that sports pharmacist role can be very pivotal, we look at those lifestyle factors because we don't want to adjust things too fast, is because that can really essentially impact a athlete's performance. And so it's all these little small things that sometimes that we miss or don't think about, that a pharmacist can do to help an athlete kind of perform at their best.
How often do you think it's important for athletes to get routine blood work?
I usually say twice a year. I like to do baseline testing and then I like to do repeat labs.
Okay.
Now, if I have an athlete that is vitamin D deficient, right? Or if I have an athlete that is iron deficient, I like to do 3 months, is because in order to see any type of physiological change, especially with iron, I'll use as an example, red blood cells turn over every 90 to 120 days. And so you want to check at that 3 4 month period. And then vitamin D, same thing. Hemoglobin A1C, which is the average of blood sugars over 3 months, that's something that you want to check every 3 months. If you have somebody that has hypothyroidism, that's something that you want to check every 3 to 4 months to see how those thyroid levels are changing, and any type of adjustments that you have to make. Again, it could be a matter of, you know, educating someone like you, Mandy, like, hey, looking at your Whoop or wearable band to see, okay, I see why your TSH has gone up. Your thyroid stimulating hormone is because you've been having poor sleep. You haven't had the best nutrition. You're training at a much higher altitude. You're training in Denver. You're training in the mountains or something to that nature that could be affecting those levels. And so it often depends, but normally I always say at least 2 months. But there are special conditions where I will say every 3 to 4 months that you should get those different blood biomarkers checked.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, thanks for clarifying that and going into more detail. I definitely think like I'm doing it every 3 months now just because I am iron deficient. So just kind of keeping track of that. But it's also, I've noticed with my training cycles, like I'm doing 3 week training cycles instead of four. I found that just works best for me.
Hmm.
Um, I just respond to it better with a little bit more rest. I don't know if it's because I'm a little bit of an older athlete now, but at the same time, I do feel like more productive in the sessions. Like it's important to suppress the body to get that stimulus. But I feel like at a certain point, I was suppressing too much where I couldn't get out of that because already with type 1 and hypothyroidism, I think like I was dug too deep.
Mm.
So just kind of that fine line is what I'm trying to be at. Like I'm hard training, but also making sure I recover in between that a little bit, so I'm not digging myself too much in a hole. So that's yeah, just fine tuning and where I can kind of maximize my recovery and my training.
And now on that note, how beneficial would you say like wearable devices have been to kind of maximize your recovery?
I would say accountability. Right, the biggest. I like the Whoop, so it's charging right now. But I have a watch, and on the other side I have the Whoop, so it's like a
Okay.
double. So found somebody on Etsy that makes it because I could not stand having both. So I have the Apple Watch because of the Dexcom that I
Yeah.
use, and yeah, the Whoop. So the wearables have been great, just off of just glucose data, seeing it when I'm training instead of checking my phone on a road ride or like when I'm around the track. Just I literally came in, finished an effort. Like now, it's so cool. The Dexcom G7 integrates right from the Dexcom to the Apple Watch, where it had to go from the Dexcom to the phone to the Apple Watch. So now it just
Oh, that's
integrates.
awesome. Okay.
Yeah, it's paired.
That seems more
Um,
seamless.
so much better because when I'm riding around the track, I sometimes my phone loses. I don't have it wireless. It's just basically when I have my phone, I have my Apple Watch. But that's been game changer too because sometimes it would lose connection really easily. So now
Yeah.
it's just paired. That's been great, especially on a road ride, so I don't have to take out my phone. But then the
Hmm.
Whoop has been great, just accountability as far as like trying to get to bed like at the same time every night. Just being competitive too, just trying to get a good sleep score.
That's
Um,
tough.
yeah, it is
Yeah.
tough. And we've talked about this. You've written about this, like having my menstrual cycle. I get the worst sleep the first 2 days. And magnesium is something that I did do and that I did increase, and I did feel like it helped. I didn't have to take as much ibuprofen. But I just felt like a little. I still had a good training session stuff, but I just like I just get overheat when I sleep. So I
Yeah.
have a chilly sleep pad. I'm a really like high maintenance sleeper. My husband gives me
Do
a
you have
hard
like a
time.
special mattress, pillow,
Oh, you don't even want to know. Like
Tempur-Pedic?
I have the sound machine, so I don't hear my husband get up at like 5:40 a.m.
Oh
I
my
have,
God.
I have I have a window fan just because right now we have AC units that we put in the windows. We live in a home that was built in 1924, so but right now we have
Still-
cool breeze happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm definitely a high maintenance sleeper. I got my eye mask and earplugs. I'm like, don't touch me, but
Oh man, you really are.
yeah, I just feel like I guess it's gotten worse as I got older, but I just feel like yeah, I'm making myself sound really great here. But But it's just about like consistency, and when I travel, it's just having that same comfort of like eye mask, earplugs. I don't, you usually have a roommate when you travel to races, so it's just
Yeah.
I guess familiar environments, and yeah, I don't have my chili sleep pad, but I make it work by
do you
keeping
ever do
conditions
you ever
full.
look at heart rate variability on your whoop band as a measure of recovery?
I do, and like mine is always between 30 and 50. I'm like,
Oh, we got
I
to
know
get
that
that up.
I've never really had it above that.
Really?
Yeah, and my resting like
What's your
heart
resting
rate.
heart rate?
Well, from the Whoop, it could be different from like from me checking it, but
Uh-huh.
um, it varies. It's like so today not so good. It's 36. That's not my resting heart rate. That's my variability, and my resting heart rate is 55. Not good. Sometimes it's 50, but when I train really hard, it's between 50 and 60.
Got it. All right. Yeah,
Yeah.
we got to get your
Um,
HRV a little closer to the 80, 90 range.
I have not had it like that. Yeah. I mean, my 6 month average is yeah, it's 39, between 39 and 41.
How many hours of sleep are you getting?
How many hours of sleep and I get is between 7 and 9.
Any interrupted? Or
Uh
is it straight 7 to 9 hours not waking up or
I uninterrupted. I
okay.
usually sometimes do have to get up at 3 a.m. to use the restroom because I drink a casein protein shake before I go to bed. So,
Got
yeah.
it.
But yeah, uninterrupted. I go into REM sleep pretty well. I'll share the Whoop data with you and get some feedback.
You know, I love to dig in the data. So,
I don't do the journaling. It should probably do that.
nah, I mean, it's an extra task, you know.
Yeah.
But just for our listeners, HRV, heart rate variability, refers to the variation in time between consecutive heartbeats, which is essentially usually measured in milliseconds. So if you think about it this way, it helps control your autonomic nervous system, which has two branches, sympathetic and your parasympathetic. Sympathetic is more hyper, aroused, active, fight or flight. Then you have your parasympathetic, which is more rest, digest, and recover, relax, right? And so essentially, you want your body to somewhat be in homeostasis, right? So your body doesn't always need to be hyperactive, and your body doesn't always need to be in rest mode. And so a higher HRV, heart rate variability, means that your body is essentially recovering better. And so your body is more adaptable, it's resilient, and has a stronger parasympathetic system. Typically lower, it's usually the reverse. And so usually this can be factors such as, which is why I was kind of asking you, Mandy, is it could be like poor sleep, maybe overtraining, wasn't really eating the best, or you're stressed out or have some anxiety before a competition or a game. But also, I try to look at like trends. And so, for example, if I'm looking at someone's heart rate variability, and I constantly see that it keeps going down, right? Even though it may not be in optimal range, then I'll definitely have reasons to ask more questions. Cause to pause is because it shouldn't be going down. If anything, if it's not in its optimal range, at least I would like to see it kind of trending up, right? Is because also it's kind of like what I tell you. You know, numbers just help guide you, but it's not the ultimate decision maker. You always want to kind of pair it with how the individual is essentially feeling. And so that's what I typically use data for, right? It's important to understand how to contextualize it, is because data is only as good as the person that's able to interpret it. If you don't know how to interpret it, it's not very helpful. But um, just looking at numbers is not the end all be all. But you got to again be able to contextualize it. So
Yeah. No, I'm curious to see what you think and if there are some improvements I can make. But yeah, I'm in a really hard training phase right now as I'm building for the season. So it kind of aligns a little bit like with where I'm at. But yeah, I do feel like I'm not in a hole. I don't feel like where I can't get out of it. So I do feel like I'm in a good spot, but I can always just make improvements, right? And that's everything can kind of affect the HRV, like you said, good nutrition, sleep. So yeah, I also
Yeah,
do yoga once a week. That's been beneficial.
there you
So
go. I mean, hey, sometimes it's those small things, man, that we can kind of fine tune that can make a difference. Because I'm sure you appreciate this, like that 1 to 2% having that competitive advantage because of something that you just kind of fine tuned, which is what we kind of always talk about. It can make all the world a difference in beating your competition or that opponent by 1 millisecond,
yeah,
right? From something you
yeah,
may have fine tuned.
yeah, yeah. Recovery is a big aspect and to performing at my best, but I don't want to contradict myself and say like I did say, type 1 diabetes has made me a better athlete in a lot of ways, but it is really hard. I sometimes it's difficult to manage my blood sugars when there's stress involved. And am I more susceptible to getting sick or, my thyroid, like if I'm in a heavy training block, does my thyroid just fluctuate more? And it is definitely like constantly just looking at the data but yeah, having the right team of people to make sure that I'm staying on target to really maximize like the training that I'm in and all the hard work that I'm putting in. I mean, it's literally my full-time job. So, yeah.
It's like, when I was looking at your labs, if you remember, like, what's the first thing I ask you? I look at it and I say, how did you feel when your labs were this? Is
Yeah.
because I can't just look at your numbers and say, all right, we need to tweak this, we need to tweak
Yeah.
that. But more importantly, if we're fine tuning something, we have to also look at that rate of perceived exertion. How is someone feeling from their training when they're usually going through recovery, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, that was leading up to the Pan American Games in 2023. And then I had a little bit of a break, so a little bit of a break was showed right there. Like I didn't really ride much too. Around that time, I did blood work.
Are
So
there like any supplements or recovery products that you typically rely on to help with that recovery process?
yeah, so I really like creatine. Um, and you could also speak on that, but like creatine, I think it helps at 5 to 10 grams a day. But
Yeah.
around building muscle mass, putting on muscle or maintaining muscle, but also the cognitive association with it. And there's also been some studies, I guess, right, done too on people who have had concussions. I have maybe like one or two, not as many as a lot of other cyclists have, but I do feel like there are a lot of positives to creatine. So that's a big one.
Yeah, it definitely has some good neurological benefits. I mean, I see more and more studies coming out about it. There was one just recently, I think roughly about 2 or 3 years ago, and it may be a little bit more relevant towards athletes who may be on like antidepressant medications, where it did show 5 milligrams of creatine did help augment the effectiveness of a medication called Lexapro, if I remember correctly. If not, it was in that same drug class of what's called SSRIs. And just to kind of give you some context, typically antidepressants usually take 4 to 6 weeks to work. And so when they added in the 5 grams of creatine, that particular SSRI, Lexapro, worked within the first week or two. They started seeing, an alleviation in symptoms. And so that just tells me, because a lot of antidepressants work on the central nervous system and trying to balance out those neurotransmitters, it tells me if it was working to help augment the process of those antidepressants, then it does have some cognitive or neurological benefits.
Yeah. No, so yeah, that's super interesting. Um, yeah, I've been really happy with taking creatine. I don't know, I see, I don't know if it's just me, but I know my blood sugars tend to like it too. There's not many studies about creatine and type 1 diabetes or diabetes in general, but I know
Yeah.
it's great. I just dry scoop it. It's fine. But whey protein I really like.
Any
Kind of the one.
particular brand?
I'm not sponsored by Earth Fed Muscle, but I like that it's pretty clean and it's right here in Pennsylvania. I think the trainer Dave or Dan, he's from
Hmm.
Garage Strength. It's a pretty renowned gym here. Um, so that's his line, and yeah, I really like it. It tastes good. I like to mix it up. Sometimes strawberry, sometimes vanilla. sometimes chocolate. Like
Yeah.
I don't like having the same thing all the time. Um, but I worked with Clean Athlete for a really long time. Um, they have some really great products. All their products are NSF certified for sport.
Yeah.
But I am partnered with Sur Nutrition, so they have a couple of items. So they have it's a beet supplement, which I really like. They have some studies done that they've done on it, specifically alt red, and that's NSF certified for sport.
Hmm.
So that's a really great supplement. Usually it's the beet nitrate, so it's like a more potent part of the beet.
Okay.
Um, so there's some good clinical studies on it for VO2 max and lactic threshold and endurance. Um, I use that during my long training days.
Yeah, no, there's great studies with beetroot, right? Since it's releasing that nitric oxide, opening up those blood vessels to help
Yeah,
increase more oxygen-rich blood flow to the tissues. Um, I've heard a lot of great things about it. I
yeah.
think there's a company. They're actually at our event, Human N. I don't know
Mm,
if you ever heard of that company, and I believe they're NSF certified too. I know they had some beetroot powder that they were promoting at our event that some of the athletic trainers kind of cling to.
okay.
So
Yeah.
a lot of different supplement companies out there.
Yeah.
Um,
Excited to try Life Cycles mushrooms.
yeah,
So it's the capsules. Well, not
the
the capsules.
tinctures.
It's the tinctures.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited to try that. They sent me a nice care package. So a couple of their things are NSF certified for sport. A couple of their products are, and yeah, I'm really excited to dive in deeper and learn more about that. So
Yeah, we'll kind of compare with the cordyceps lion's mane to see
yeah,
what benefit we get from it.
yeah, absolutely. I being in Pennsylvania too. We have a lot of local farms, and they have lion's mane here. So I've been putting that into my soup,
Ooh.
like a broth, and
Uh
then I
huh.
add like vegetables to it. So yeah, there's a lot of also positives on for cognitive and just overall health. So yeah.
Do you ever check labels for like banned substances or ingredients that could affect your blood sugars?
Um, yeah, I watch out more so for uh, things like with a lot of sugar or carbohydrates. Like I think it's still important after a workout to get the carbohydrates, but
Yeah.
you can do that naturally with milk or something. You don't need it through. I don't like it through the protein powder. I just think they have too much sugar.
Hmm.
Um, when they have high in carbs, they're kind of usually high in sugar, or it's or they're sweetened, and I don't know, it doesn't taste that great.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, with supplement companies, and I always tell our athletes this, and this is a another feather in the cap for sports pharmacists on some services that they can offer is that while a product may be NSF sports certified, informed sport may have all of those third party certifications listed, right? And you know me, I always ask also for a certificate of analysis. It's part of my verification system to make sure that there is clean ingredients in there. Um, the other piece that is sometimes missed is the efficacy, which is the effectiveness, right? And so, whatever supplement you're taking, is it the therapeutic dose? Like, has it been scientifically tested? Is there some type of research behind it? Like, what's the clinical utilities? Because what I found being in my field is that there's plenty of supplements out there that are third party tested, NSF Sports certified, but it doesn't always necessarily meet the checkbox of using the clinically effective dose. Like how you said, creatine 5 to 10 grams. That's spot on. That's the dose that was tested, right? But when we get into like magnesium, I don't know, beta alanine,
mhm.
betaine. Like there's certain doses that were actually studied that if you're looking for some type of performance or athletic benefit, that's what you would want, right? And so that other side of making sure that there was some due diligence behind the clinical research on the dose that was actually used is important is because I say too the dose makes the poison, meaning that like I see a lot of athletes will sometimes take these pre workouts, Mandy, and they're scratching, and I'm like,
Oh, the beta
why are you the
alanine.
beta alanine? And then I'm
Yeah,
looking at then it's the energy drink, it's the pre
too
workout,
much.
and I'm like, man, you're taking 7 to 8 grams of beta alanine. Wonder why you're scratching like that and you're having these symptoms of tingling.
Yeah. Yeah, beta alanine is also one. But yeah, that also is dependent, right, on your weight, kind of how much you should be taking.
Yeah,
So mine's like 3 to 5 grams a day, no more.
right.
But yeah, it's consistently also builds up in your system. You can't just like randomly always have take beta alanine. It's like a lactic buffer, right? Correct? Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's lactic buffer.
Yeah. I'm mostly in the ADP sprint kind of side of things, so
Yeah.
never, yeah, so it's definitely creatine and beta alanine are pretty big in the sprint world.
What's funny, man? Like you are probably one of the very few athletes that I talk to that are educated on physiology on how these supplements work. Or even I ask them, why are you taking this? Oh, I don't know, because so and so told me that it's going to help with my performance. But you don't know why you're taking it, you know.
I see. Yeah, I like understanding why and what it does, and I
Yeah.
guess maybe that's just the diabetes background. But thanks. Yeah, maybe I got the wrong degree. No, I don't. Yeah, I don't know. So I think about like in some ways, it's very interesting to me, and it's like, why didn't I get into this when I was younger? I don't know. Maybe I took one science class, and maybe it was the teacher. I don't know. I just didn't do great, and so yeah, I like the business classes better. But yeah, you find your team of people, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. It's like I always say, the creed I live by is trust but verify.
Yeah, I guess because
Yeah.
it's like I have a passion for this and like how it affects my body and kind of understanding it and just yeah, there's always so much to learn, but I guess that just makes me more interested in that approach just because yeah, I don't want to just take anything and I don't want to take it because it's a fad or it's cool. I want to do it the right way. Obviously, like my approach is also with food, but if I can support my body with supplementation through like additional magnesium and I do have an iron deficiency and my vitamin D is low too. Like yeah, just there's so many other things that I have to look out for, but I just want to make sure I'm not overdoing it, but just doing it the right way. So, um, yeah.
Yeah. And, speaking of supplement efficacy, while we're on this topic and understanding what supplements are doing, oftentimes when I'm asked about different vitamins or minerals, a lot of them are bound to what's called a salt form or a base. And it's kind of like what you talked about is, the iron deficiency, right? And how you may have to take iron. Not all iron is created equally, right? You have ferrous sulfate, you have ferrous bisglycinate, you have more of a slow released iron. They're all different. And so sometimes, I have to educate our athletes is that the most bioavailable form of iron, if we're trying to increase those levels up, is going to be ferrous sulfate, right? It's absorbed the best. Now, sometimes those drawbacks, right? I know that with us being pharmacists, we're medication experts, and we understand side effects. There's side effects of supplements too, and so sometimes when I'm talking to an athlete about taking iron, specifically ferrous sulfate, while it does have the best absorption, it's recommended you take it on an empty stomach to maximize it, but it has the drawback of constipation.
Yeah.
And sometimes it irritates people's stomach. And based off the study, sometimes I want to tell people, like, hey, just go ahead and take it with food just so that you can be compliant with it. Well, the studies show if you take it with food, it decreases the absorption by 30-40%, which is pretty significant. And so I'll have to
Mm.
move over to something like ferrous bisglycinate, which is easier on the stomach. But the difference is that you have to take it more times a day. Instead of taking it once a day, you have to take it 2 to 3 times a day to get that true clinical effectiveness effect.
Okay. Wow, I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know that. Obviously, there are different types of magnesium and different types of
Yes, different
iron,
types
but
of, yeah,
yeah, it was definitely conflicting of when I was trying to up my iron, like when I should take it, morning or night, on an empty stomach or not. Like it was just like
yeah.
some of us, it's just too much sometimes.
It's a
So,
lot of
but
variables.
I was I was trying, but it my yeah, my ferritin was 39. So, yeah, I spoke to my endocrinologist, and I'm really glad that he recognized that and gave me the option of doing the iron infusion. And then I had to go run it by USADA because I can't go past 100 mLs. So it's a pretty when I do the iron infusion, it's a small bag and it's pretty potent. Like there's no saline in there really rinsing it. So um, yeah, I'm definitely getting a little bit of iron like that, probably that much. But
Mhm.
if you probably can't, if you're listening, you probably can't see that. But it's less than 100. It's less than 100. But I do notice like I just sleep better once it's back up. I can tell when it starts to drop. Like I'm not recovering as well. Like I just, but who knows? Maybe it could be my thyroid too. Like, right? There's just so many variables. But
There is.
that definitely was a big one because I would wake up nauseous and I didn't understand why. I knew
Mm.
before it was like my thyroid, and I was like, why do I just feel like I don't, do I have acid reflux? Like, what is going on? And it was because my iron was so low.
And just for our listeners out there, typically the reference range for ferritin, which is our storage compartment for iron, is usually roughly between 20 to about 110. Don't quote me on it, but it's around that reference range. So for athletes, we usually want them to be a little bit over 50, 60 because of, again, the physical demands that they're using. And you essentially lose iron through the back end. When you make a bowel movement, then you lose quite a bit of it from sweat. And then for women, specifically with menstrual cycles, you can just imagine how much iron you're losing, right?
Yeah,
And so if you're a competitive athlete, having all those competing demands against you, if you're a female, you want to make sure those levels are optimal, not normal.
yeah, absolutely. And it's just like taking care of my body now, doing the most that I can, and also educating myself, but also for the future. When I retire from sport, I want to be healthy and have kids. And so it's kind of also making sure that I am not damaging my body, so to speak, but yeah, just if it needs some extra help with an iron infusion, and that's what I have to do. So
And with the iron infusions, Mandy, have you ever heard of the word TUE, therapeutic use exception?
correct. Yeah. So I do have a TUE for insulin. I don't need it for my CGM, which is kind of odd, um, which I've talked to them about. But so I do have the TUE for insulin. I didn't need it for the iron infusion unless it's over 100 mLs.
Right.
So yeah. So I'm an ambassador for True Sport, which is the grassroots program of USADA. They not only educate on clean sport, but also go to community events or schools and just talk about the values that sport has, whether that's everything from sportsmanship to responsibility to respect. So this summer I'm going to Susquehannock. It's a camp an hour and a half away. It's a boys and girls camp and it's really fun. And they're from all over. There's a couple like athletes from all over the world that go to this camp, and it's I think it's 100 years old.
Wow.
They're in cabins. They get to try different sports every day, but that is with True Sport, and I get to be out there and share my story with the kids and also play some different sports. And it's just a fun weekend. So I'm gonna go there 4th of July weekend.
Oh,
Um,
that's going to be exciting.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really yeah, the head director, Jeff Bell, he's been running the camp, and yeah, it's just a phenomenal camp and it's so much fun. So I got to do a lot of really cool things with True Sport, and yeah, just share what I've learned through the sport and hang out with the kids.
Do you know Tammy Hansen over at USADA?
I do, yeah. I saw that she was a speaker at your event. Is that
Oh man, she's amazing. She
yeah?
is the salt of the earth. I hope that she's listening to this podcast because she's sweet, and we really appreciate everything that she does.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I think USADA is an amazing organization doing a lot
They
compared to a
are.
lot of other countries that we compete against. I mean, their guidelines to testing athletes. I mean, they're consistent. We all have to do our whereabouts. So there's definitely more of a protocol in place. And yeah, we're competing at this level. We want to know we're doing it the right way, and it's ensuring that there is the right resources in place. And it's yeah, just about consistency and staying true to yourself. And yeah, I want to know that I've reached the Olympic Games in LA, knowing that I've done it the best way possible,
Yeah.
the clean way, and with diabetes and all the other let's say chronic conditions. But I think, yeah, just educating myself and being aware, and just having the right team of people to also educate me, I think is really important.
Now, I don't know this answer. Maybe you do. I don't know if you'll be a record breaker here, but would you essentially be like the first, athlete that has type 1 diabetes at the Olympics?
Um, I'm not at the Olympics because Gary Hall Jr., swimmer,
Okay.
he has type 1 diabetes, and there's a male rider from Poland. He has type 1. He
Got it.
was at the Olympics. Might be female track sprint cyclists, but there are actually
Oh,
two other female cyclists on the team who also have diabetes, which
okay.
is crazy. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So
Interesting.
yeah, it is. It's really cool. So hopefully, yeah, it could maybe be an all type 1 lineup. Who knows? So it's kind of a different little bit of a superpower just because it does make you tough in a lot of ways.
Well, you're going to get there. We talk
Yeah.
about this, speaking things into the universe, speaking things into existence. And, obviously, faith without work is dead. You're putting in the work clearly. And I think it's going to pay off dividends for you.
Thank
So,
you. No, I appreciate that. Missing the Tokyo and Paris by one Olympic qualifying spot was really hard.
oh, man.
Yeah, it's you qualify as a nation, not as an individual,
Got
right?
it. Okay.
But you do when you go to races. It's literally a 2-year Olympic qualifying process. So
Wow.
this is kind of the build year, and next year kind of starts, and that's usually World Cups that count towards Olympic qualification, um, Continental Championships. Can you believe the Pan American Games is not part of our qualification? Because that would have really helped.
That's
Um,
wild.
it is, yeah,
Yeah.
and
And you
also
got medals for that. And,
yeah, yeah.
jeez.
But our program, our sprint program, it was just me and another rider for a really long time, and now it's finally in the last 3 years it picked up in 2022 where we had a head coach. He brought in resources into the program, so now we finally are having resources and support within the program. Now the team is based out in LA in the daily training environment there, and I travel out to Los Angeles for camps occasionally.
Okay.
But my home base is here with Edge Cycling and my coach. I've been with him since he identified my sprint potential back in 2013. So I've gained a lot of strength in the gym, on the bike. It takes years to develop that type of strength. And yeah, I'm really fortunate to be working with him and the group here, and then I go out to LA for camps. So it's a good balance, and really excited to be racing for Edge Cycling this year. I know I'm no longer, like I said, racing for Team Novo Nordisk,
Yeah.
but they've been a big part of my life. But I really want to give back the last few years of my career, um, with Edge Cycling, helping the younger athletes too that I train with, but also helping my coach and bridge some of those connections within the community, like with St. Luke's that I have. They're going to be one of the sponsors on our kit, so I'm really excited.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's a big one, and yeah, I just want to give back to my coach because he's done so much. So I really want to finish my career honoring that.
Now, was this the same coach where I was watching your video published by Novo Nordisk where they were sharing your story? And what really caught my attention, and it speaks to his level of staying grounded and obviously seeing your potential, is when you guys had that conversation. I thought it was a beautiful moment when you asked him, and if it's the same coach, of course, where you asked him, he's like, I think you say, I'm butchering this, of course. You say, is it different, you having to train somebody with type 1 diabetes versus not? And he says, like, sometimes I forget that you have it.
Yeah,
Is
I've
that the
heard
same
that.
guy?
Yeah, it is. That's Andrew, Coach
Man,
Andrew.
he's
Yeah,
hats off to him.
yeah. he's so supportive, like around
Yeah,
racing and stuff. He does know that like where my blood sugars are. He understands. He does have a physiology background too.
good.
And yeah, he's very understanding. But yeah, even my husband like sometimes like says like I forget that you
You
have it because
forget.
you're so well controlled. And I'm like talking to people at dinner or like I'm out and I'm literally taking my insulin and they don't even know that I did that because I'm literally speaking and I'm taking my insulin. Like I just click and then I take it. Like it's just kind of become like so natural that I just,
Yeah,
do in front of people or I don't really ever complain about it. The only time I feel like it is a little bit of a mind game is when I'm racing and I'm like, oh, I'm not recovering right now because my blood sugar is so high. But I
mm,
just he understands, but there's literally nothing I can do. I just got to go up there and race. Like it's kind of like in that moment, it's just like I know I'm racing another rider one on one, but it's like
right.
literally me against myself right now too because I have to prove to myself like you have one shot. Like and you want to get to the finals later tonight, like you have to make it through this ride.
You got to
So
literally give it your all.
yeah, but I'm happy that my coach is so supportive, and I think that's why I like this environment here too, is because my teammates here, though they're a little bit younger than me and all, but they're just a great group of athletes, and yeah, I just feel like with St. Luke's here too, I just feel like I have my home base of like my Olympic training center here.
Hey, that like we talked about earlier in the episode, that support system makes all the difference, you
Yeah,
know. So, and it seems like you've also built up some very strong mental resilience.
it's taken a lot of time. Taking a
Yeah.
lot of time. Definitely getting knocked down with not making the Olympics twice, like really hurts. You kind of feel like your one big last goal like you haven't accomplished yet. But it was a hard reset last summer. I literally it was the first summer and since I moved up to Pennsylvania since 2010 that I didn't race. I just took the summer off. I needed a hard reset and it really helped me physically and mentally and I just built back my strength and it took a lot of time, but
Yeah.
it's worth it. And yeah, I'm just glad to be building, a good support network as I prepare and just staying grounded and yeah, just be doing the best that I can.
You're going to get there. So,
Yeah, we're gonna get there.
yeah, there we go.
Yeah. No,
Team
I feel good
effort.
about this. I feel good about this. Like if it wasn't in LA, I might have retired. I would have probably retired just because I don't know. I'm 32. Yes,
Yeah.
32. But the age is like 35, 36 for us.
Yeah.
But it just there's this something like our former coach who had been the national team coach. He said third time's a charm. So yeah, I
It's like
believe.
I like to reference a story of Roger Federer. I don't know if you know him. I'm sure you
Yeah,
heard of him,
of
world
course.
class tennis player. But you know about his career, how he got injured, and people thought his best days were behind him, and then all of a sudden he comes back at like what was it, age 35, 36, and like literally it was like he found the fountain of youth and he just started winning matches back to back to back to
Yeah,
back.
yeah. That's an inspiring story. And tennis
It
is tough
is,
on your body. No,
right?
it's true. Like Lindsey Vonn just came back. I follow her on LinkedIn, and she's inspiring because she's also been knocked down a lot, and she just had literally knee surgery like a year ago, and she just landed back on the podium. Like it's
I
yeah,
love
don't
those
lose.
stories, Mandy, man.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm like, oh, like there it is. Like just yep, I'm third time's a charm, and I'm, just finding those little inspirations because it's like, yeah, it's I was asked last summer, are you retiring? Like, or like there's younger riders coming up on the program. It's like, no, I'm still here. Like,
Yeah, right.
let me just reset. Like, so the national team program has been really positive in letting me reset and stuff. So they've been
Good.
supportive in that. So yeah, I do feel like a big part of that is just communicating what your goals are, what your needs are, and just being ready for that next Olympic qualification that's starting soon. So
So, what advice would you give other athletes managing type 1 diabetes or any chronic health condition, especially when they're working with a coach or like a medical staff member?
Yeah, my biggest advice would be to just advocate for yourself. Be proactive. Also, educate your coaches and your staff what your needs are. I think is really important, and just make sure you're a part of that conversation when decisions are being made. It's okay to not be afraid. Like, don't be afraid to ask for adjustments or support. It's mainly just advocating for yourself and what you need. Um, yeah, and just don't really set that limit. I think that's important. Like, don't just be like, oh, that's it, it's over. I think it's really important to communicate what your needs are, and and I think journaling really helps. I do keep a journal with my cycling stats, my numbers, my power data, and I do like make little notes in there. So it just keeps me accountable. And that's the big word is accountability, I think, and just consistency. So I know that's pretty big advice, but just advocating for yourself is really important and having that support system there for you.
I know that, and I explained to you how I kind of got into working with athletes that have type 1 diabetes, which was, a situation I came across where, when in hockey, right, when they do like the physicals, you have, in general, hockey, there's a lot of international players, especially from Canada, right? And so the pricing transparency is not necessarily the same, right? What you get in Canada is not the same as what you get in the United States as far as the price of insulin. And I came across a rookie one time when I was doing, our annual physicals for a hockey team that we support. And he was on the Omnipod. And he told me when I did my questionnaire of what medications he's taken. He was telling me what he was taking, and then when it came down to me calling this in to the pharmacy called him back, and they were like, "Hey, the price is like $700, very expensive." And pretty much he was kind of at a loss for words, is because here it is, he's type 1 diabetes, he's a rookie, he's obviously not making a whole lot of money, right? He's new to this game, and he didn't have the support system I found that he needed. And so one of the things that I did, and it was just a long shot, but hey, it ended up working, and then I was able to do it anytime that I see more athletes that have type 1 diabetes, is I reached out to the manufacturer, and I pretty much, pled my case about his situation. And thankfully, speaking to the right representative, they were able to give him complimentary Omnipod cartons to help allow him to take his insulin. And so when we think about, like, to your point, being the biggest advocate for yourself and then also having that support system, like, there is a way to optimize your health with the right people on your team. There are a lot of resources available, whether that's support groups and communities, or whether it's a pricing thing when it comes down to getting your medications that are affordable. And then I was able to connect with the Dexcom rep. It's because he was also using a Dexcom, and I was able to get him a really good discount on the continuous glucose monitor. And so that was like my path to saying, like, man, we think, and I think that there's this perception that just because they're an athlete, they have it all together, man. And you probably know this, like, we think that they make a lot of money, they have all the resources in their corner. That is not always the case. Do not assume. You know, do your job as you're supposed to, and I promise you, you'll be remembered. Especially the way that I look at it is, I am a healthcare provider. My job is to keep people, and I'm not just going to say athletes, people, healthy and safe. And so whatever that means, whether that's, educating on someone being compliant with their medications, helping them get access to affordable care, whatever that may be. And it essentially inspired me to want to, start that Sports Pharmacy magazine to educate on things like this and create a topic on special populations, is because I found, based off my experience, there is a subgroup of chronic conditions that are often overlooked just because health providers think that they're simply just athletes and they have it all together. And I advocate for the sports pharmacists is because, no knock against physicians or any of the other supporting staff. They're experts in their space, but oftentimes they're busy. And so when you think about like a pharmacist being, one of the most accessible providers, also not just having the medication background, also having the disease pathology and physiology background, understanding disease states, and having access to a variety of different resources for chronic care management, leverage it. I can't tell you how many athletes I've dealt with too that have asthma, right? And they're constantly coming to me telling me, like, hey, at the end of the game or in the middle of the game or their training session, they're wheezing, there's shortness of breath. And then I do the teach pack method, right? I educate them. I'm like, all right, how are you taking your inhaler? Oh, I'm taking it this way. And I'm like, well, this isn't necessarily the correct way. This is the way that I've always been doing it. This is how my doctor told me to do it. I'm like, well, wait a second. Have you thought about like adding a spacer, which is a device that kind of connects to the inhaler that helps with delivery of the medication to make it more effective? And
Hmm.
sometimes those small things, it goes back to, all right, that fine tuning that you can do to help with the adherence and the effectiveness of medication, it makes all the difference. I know I went on a saga, but
No, I find it so inspiring. I'm, I do. I think what you did for that one athlete and the many athletes that you've helped, I mean, that's because you found a way like to help him and you advocated for him. That's the biggest thing is like there's not many that advocate for type 1 athletes specifically because it is a small population, but yeah, it's like we want to be able to live a great life and still do great things. And yeah, if we can have somebody advocating for us with experience and with the right tools and knowledge, it's like it's very rare. I've only come across of it on my Team Novo Nordisk, and my
Mhm.
endocrinologist who does have, some background with that. But I am just amazed, and I thank you for the community that you're building and how much you're doing to educate and help people and athletes all over. I think it's needed, especially for those special populations. Yeah, like we're redefining that, I think in a
Yep.
lot of ways. And even though like I'm at this level, I'm always fine tuning, and I do want to make improvements in how I can approach training and sleep and recovery and everything, just better. And I appreciate the knowledge and perspective that you can bring. Um, yeah, it's great, and I thank you.
Of course, that's why we're connected. We
Yes,
speak the same language, giving back,
yeah,
bridging the gap for things, paving the way for people. So,
yeah, and hopefully, like someday, like I can help you with other athletes just from my experience. I know I don't have the doctor degree, but just through just through
you
what
got
we've
the
learned.
doctorate education, though.
Yeah, I'm working on it. I'm getting my master's in business,
You
but
think
it's
at
a
a high level, so that's enough.
yeah, we're at the elite level, right?
Yeah.
No, so yeah, well, we keep it elite, and yeah, I find it such an interesting niche environment, and I'm incredibly excited to see how much I'm going to learn and how much, you know, I can also bring in a value and perspective too.
Now, my last question for you. I know we've kind of talked about it uh, quite a bit throughout this podcast here, but if you can design the perfect sports healthcare team, what role would you want your sports pharmacist to play? If you want one on your team.
Of course, I'm all in. Um, Really, the biggest thing is how to better manage my diabetes around training, adaptation, travel, stress, and just those performance demands, like how it affects the medication that I'm taking, my thyroid. So just understanding my thyroid better is something
Hmm.
that I definitely want to fine tune. And I do feel like the endocrinologist does that, but I need it at the elite level. And just one more notch up. Just yeah, just ensuring that I'm doing it too. Supplement safety is really important to me. So you had said that you looked into this certificate of analysis. I really I really respect that a lot. You just understand too the travel, the demand, the training. You're an athlete yourself. You're going for a VO2 max test in a couple of weeks. Like,
That's right.
I, I think you practice what you definitely practice what you preach. So I respect that a lot. So I think I hold that to that degree. So that's really my perfect pharmacist, someone that's also practicing what they're preaching and just can educate me on things that I'm missing and how I can better show up for my sport and the United States in the best way possible.
Well, you're gonna have one on your team, or you have
Yeah.
one on your team.
Um, I'm so happy. I'm really fortunate. I wish like it's sad to say because you were right. Like athletes don't make a lot of money, and I like
You got to
one day
work
I
your way up to that,
one
right?
day I will, and one day I will pay it back for it in any way that I can. But no, I really are appreciative and on all that you're doing. Yeah, I want to be able to advocate too on your network and what you're doing, and I love that USADA is involved, and maybe you can get True Sport involved, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's you're building that network, that weather system. So
No, anytime, it's always my pleasure. And my goal is, especially for athletes that may have chronic health conditions, is to help try to remove those health barriers so athletes can essentially perform at their best, safely, legally, and consistently.
and is the summit that you're going to be having going to be every year?
Yes, and you're going next year.
I'd love to if it doesn't conflict with my race schedule, but yes,
We're gonna
I'm
find a
really
way.
yeah, no, absolutely. No, I love that it's going to be a yearly thing and it's just going to keep growing of
Yeah.
knowledge and information. So awesome.
Well, what's a good way for people to find you, learn more about your story?
So I have an active website. It's just mandymarquardt.com. But I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. And I like LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, I think you're pretty active on LinkedIn.
I think it's fun. I like it better than scrolling on Instagram, to be honest. I just find it
Like
just
more educational and
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, inspiring and yeah, yeah. So I've liked that platform a lot. Also, my former professors do encourage it just for networking. Coming from Penn State too, it's one of the biggest alumni networks. So yeah, they were definitely like in my undergrad, they were like, yeah, you need to be active on LinkedIn. That was back in 2014. So
Oh man. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you, Mandy, and thanks for being on the podcast. Well, guys, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for tuning to this week's episode. We hope you found the content of this episode insightful and thought provoking for both your health and performance. Follow and share our content on social media and subscribe to our podcast. We will include any relevant studies or references in the show notes. As a reminder, the information provided by the Sports Pharmacy Network is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Thank you again for listening to the Sports Pharmacy Network podcast, and we look forward to you enjoying us on the next episode that will drop in a few weeks.